All right, folks, it's time to hang up the kelp and let out some secrets here on the We Know Severance podcast on RHAP. We know scripted TV. We know Severance, Season 1, Episode 5, The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design. The latest episode here on our Severance Season 1 guided tour all the way toward the Season 2 premiere of Severance on January 17th on Apple TV Plus. Is it circled in your calendar? Because it certainly is in mine. Very excited to talk about some more Severance here this week. Joined here, as always, by someone who always helps me hang the kelp, the great Dr. Melissa. Melissa, I know that you've always been a big believer in the healing powers of seaweed.
Sorry, I've just been sitting here like working on this joke, and I'm just trying to come up with something to intro into the podcast, and I've just been pacing back and forth in this conference room.
Yeah, you've been. I keep hearing something about larva.
My pouch has been filled with my larval offspring. Apparently,
pouches to carry the young. Unbelievable. Well, hopping out of the pouch right now. This is a bizarre sight as Dr. Amanda emerges from the larval sac and into the podcast.
And I say, we're friends. We're friends. Well, that was the scene that we did. Do you remember? It was the larval offspring scene that we performed. We did a table reading, if you will.
Oh, we will.
We will for the PSR sort of grand hurrah.
Correct.
In the wind down.
The final run of post-show recaps earlier this year, we got many of the podcasters together to say goodbye to their respective shows, and we did that in the form of, rather than discussing them, we became the shows. And so we acted out a bunch of scenes from various shows, including, Dylan, Irving, and Bert meeting here in the conference room. I was halfway tempted to go back and re-listen to it to just see how bad my Christopher Walken was.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
I feel like there's a reason why we are, I know, at least for myself, podcasters and not actors. There's just a very different skill set involved.
I think I embodied Dylan. I actually think
you did great.
The role.
You did incredibly, actually. That F had so much intensity to it. It was great.
You, the king of Fs.
Yes.
You don't trust
and
us.
Actually, my wrists still hurt from you tying that belt around me.
Well, I'm a method table reader. I had to be in the moment.
We're all method podcasters here on the We Know Severance podcast, which of course you can subscribe to, weknowseverance.com. Tell a friend. Severance is coming back. Don't know if you knew that, January 17th. And it behooves all of us to either watch Severance for the very first time if you're going to watch season 2. I cannot imagine how that's going to work for you. So this could be a first-time watch for some people. For others, it is a rewatch. This is a guided tour. It's some informed guidance through Severance. We're not doing major spoilers, but we are talking about the themes and using some of what we know about the future of the show to inform what we're talking about here. So we are officially halfway through season 1 of Severance here on the watch. Melissa, does it ever strike you that season 1 of Severance, despite how long it has taken for season 2 to come around, that season 1 doesn't it feel both like long and short somehow? Like a lot happens.
Much happens.
But we've only been doing this for 5 weeks.
Yeah, I keep forgetting what episode we're on when I prepare for the podcast in the upcoming week, because it feels like we started this last week and yet also we've been doing it for 5 weeks. And I think you're right. So much happens in each episode, particularly even just the first one. Looking back, you're like, wait, all of this happens in the very first episode of the show. And every episode since then has been sort of similarly chock full. We're going to at some point we have to talk about the goats, right? The goats are in this episode, which is just wild.
I believe today we'll talk about the goats.
I believe we will.
I think
we've been restraining ourselves. Amanda in particular has been holding back.
Well, one thing I don't know if we're going to talk about today, but there is a trailer, a real 2-minute trailer now
Correct.
for Severance season 2. And I don't know if talking about the trailer at all is spoiler territory. I mean, it's obviously there's some things that it picks up on that we haven't gotten to yet in the show. But some of the stuff we'll talk about today does get revisited in the trailer. So I think that, that it'll be fun when we get a chance to dive into that.
Little state secret. I haven't watched the trailer.
Ooh.
Neither have I.
I've been afraid that the trailer would spoil season 2 of Severance for me.
Wow. Well, we would hate for that to happen.
That would be rough. So
yeah.
So I'm not watching the trailer for that reason.
I have watched the trailer. I've watched it several times. I actually have screenshots on my phone that I've zoomed in on.
Of course.
So if there's ever an opportunity, if we want to maybe do that as a tag to the end of our watch, or at some point we can talk more about it. But no, this is it's exciting to be at this point at season 1 where we're through episode 5 now. I totally agree with you, Melissa, that on the rewatch, my experience has been like, wow, all of that happened in this episode. Like, I knew that happened at some point, but we're already here. And yet I also know there's like so much coming that I can't wait to get to. And this show like feels very well paced.
Yes.
Like, despite the fact that we're talking about how packed it is, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like everything has time to breathe. But yeah, this is an episode where we get some WTF moments that we'll talk about, and some really, really good, memorable lines, and that great scene that we chose to embody for the PSR Table Reads podcast. So I'm excited to get into it.
All right. Well, let's hop into it. Of course, let's also remind people that they can send in feedback if they would like. severancerhap@gmail.com. We have been very, very blessed to get so many great emails over the last couple of weeks. I'd like to read one on every podcast. This one came our way from Robin Dancer, and the subject line was, hello. I'm just going to read the email real quick. Hello. I've recently checked out your video and wanted to give you a heads up about our growth service. YouTube views, $2 for 1,000 YouTube likes. $4 for 1,000 YouTube subscribers. 40. Oh, it's a solicitation.
Well, thank you so much, Robin, for the support. Thank you for the feedback.
That could be interesting, actually. The investment opportunity. All right, the grim barbarity of optics and design. Let's do a quick plot recap, courtesy of Jesse S. Hey, kids, what's for dinner? We got another quick plot recap here on the grim barbarity of optics and design. And we begin with some good news. Helly R is alive. She's been sent to the hospital to recover for a few days, but that's all that any Helly gets, as Audi Helly sends her right back to Lumon afterwards, where she's observed by Miss Casey in a new experiment that Miss Cobell is working on. Miss Casey says she could perform a hug upon request. Helly isn't particularly interested, though. In an act of defiance, she wipes the makeup off of her scarred neck and takes Mark up on an offer to see where the pen caps are kept. Mark shows Helly his recreation of Petey's map and asks her for her help in helping him finish it. After wandering the Lumon halls and stumbling upon, checks notes, a man feeding baby goats, Helly finally agrees she's going to help out Mark. Meanwhile, Irving is seeing the goop again, and that makes him want to go and visit Bert. But in an effort to keep them apart, Mr. Milchick plants a piece of art that looks to represent the rumored O&D coup for Irving to find. Miss Casey tells Irving, however, that Bert is in their conference room, and Dylan, being ever distrustful of O&D, goes and locks Bert inside. O&D distrusts MDR just as much as MDR is rumored to have marsupial pouches that hold a larva that will eventually take over for them. So there's plenty of reason for O&D not to trust MDR, but as it turns out Bert's just here because he missed Irving. He's just trying to come up with a funny joke to tell him upon their reunion. Bert ends up taking Dylan and Irving to O&D, where they see the same painting, but this time it's in reverse, and it's called the Macro Data Refinement Calamity. Why would they have two versions of the same painting? ... But then Bert introduces Irving and Dylan to the remainder of O&D, and that's where we leave the Lumon side of the storyline. But there's more. Lastly, Devin is having her baby. And Ricken is going to be really locked in on this, except for the fact that he's more distracted that Audi Mark has lost his copy of the UUR and a thief has discovered it. But the thief may return the book upon completing it. So that's very good. Things that might not be very good are this birthing compound that Devin finds herself at with a mysterious friend with ridiculously sick coffee. And beyond that, Devin is going to receive the beginnings of a secret from Mark, who tells her that Lumon is up to something. So we will see where that goes. Jesse S. leaves us all with a question. Do you know how to make your eyes kind? For the video version, should we try? Because we do these on YouTube now.
Are we doing kind eyes, or are we doing Mark's version of kind
Right, because
eyes?
Mark's version is wild.
Oh, come on. That's so, you guys are being so mean. He's just doing kind eyes.
Yeah.
These are kind eyes.
I think you want to. I think
so mad.
Yeah.
I think you want to smize, right? Exactly, Melissa. I think you want to narrow a little. You want to smize a little bit. The big, like what is that called? The supaku, when you can see the tops and the bottoms. Like that's threatening eyes. That's not kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are these kind eyes? Are these kind eyes?
That's kind eyes.
Sure,
Yeah, that's
good.
kind eyes. Yeah.
So
you nailed it. You
is the
got
secret
very kind
the
eyes.
kind eyes that you like kind of like keep them closed?
Well,
Like,
I
'cause
think the
I'm
smile
kinda like-
probably also helps. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I do think you want to light squint, and I'm getting reflection in my glasses, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to show it that.
Yeah.
I think it's like, did anybody ever tell you that like when a cat blinks at you, it's like giving you kisses?
Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should blink back at your cats, which is
Yeah, that's like giving blink. Yeah, that's what you want to do. I think you want to give cat kisses.
Yeah. Okay. I have kind eyes then, because I give cat kisses every day.
I'm sure you're a pro.
I am a pro. Okay, so a lot going on in this episode. Some new areas of Lumon that are, if not totally discovered by us, then certainly discovered by the characters, as Bert is going to take Irving and Dylan to O&D, and we end the episode with "These are my friends" as they all walk in. Where should we begin? Do we want to begin there with this sort of like, it is the name of the episode is The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design, which I think is one of my favorite names for an episode of TV, let alone Severance.
It's really great. I mean, it's so poetic, and it's so like, it's great. Like the whole 1984 kind of like double speak of it, is really, it's really satisfying. Yeah, I mean, I want to start with this was like really fascinating to me in this episode, how Milchek is kind of acting alone, right? We find out that he took the initiative to independently plant this picture, which is apparently is like such a known quantity of a move that it's called a 266. You ran a 266 on Irving B.
Have either of you ever ran a 266 on anybody?
Just like plant a bloody scene like in the copy.
In the book, it's like plant a piece of Renaissance art, but it's violent in order to prevent two lovers from connecting.
Right. I haven't, shockingly enough.
I would think it would almost be a higher number, though. Like, I feel like that's only the 266th of these kinds of schemes. Like,
right.
I don't know if you'd expect it to be more towards the beginning or not.
I mean, I want to know what all the other 265 schemes are.
At least.
No spoilers.
Yeah. So Milchek is observing what's happening, and he's like interfering in his own passive way. But then the layer above is that Harmony is observing Milchek and observing MDR, and she's also got her own little gambit that she's running that has to do with Miss Casey. So I thought that this was really interesting, that there's these different Lumon leadership agendas that are happening, and it's all like very passive aggressive and manipulating. Like it's all very manipulative.
Yeah.
But it's kind of at this removed level. Like they're kind of letting these MDR innies get away with quite a bit, but they're also watching it and they're also moving these chess pieces for them to react to.
Yeah. Miss Cobell is seemingly on one, I think is maybe a way to describe it. Mr. Grainer, we don't like him. We don't like Mr. Grainer. And Mr. Grainer doesn't necessarily really like what Miss Cobell has going on. He tells her to be careful. And what is she? Yes, daddy, I believe.
Yeah.
Is what she says there.
Just a casual. It's the way I respond to all my coworkers.
Yeah. Yes, daddy. And so I think we're not trying to do spoilers here, but I don't think it's a big spoiler to say that is not her actual father, Mr. Grainer.
I mean, do we know that?
As far as we know.
Can we confirm?
We can't fully confirm it, I don't think. We could just assume.
Could be a clone of her father.
Could be a clone of her father.
Exactly. We are in the clone era of the Severance podcast now, officially.
We're starting to get there. And like
I'm there.
I'm exercising some self-restraint because I feel like that's going to take a lot of eraser real estate today. So we're very excited to launch into all of that. But yeah, she has this new idea for what she wants to do with Miss Casey, who up until now we've only seen in the context of her office in the wellness department. Interesting to see Miss Casey wandering the floor, and I think that she almost has Melissa this sort of like all the innies are a little weird, and all the people who work at Lumen are a little weird, but there's like something like almost a little alien about Miss Casey, like something like specifically weird about her.
Totally, yeah, and it's interesting that I think Cobell is kind of going rogue in a couple different ways in this episode, right? She's sort of letting them get away with some things. She's doing whatever this new thing is with Miss Casey that she's sort of playing around with. And yeah, it definitely leads to some question of like, what is the deal with Miss Casey? Why is she so strange? This whole like 8-minute round trip that she goes on the very quick walk. I think it's interesting though that she is the one that tells Irving that Bert's in the conference room. Like, first of all, why is she like, what does she know about the situation that she would bother to like tell Irving that? Like, for all she knows, the two of them talked for 2 seconds outside of her office, right? So clearly she is somehow informed. And then also the fact that is like information that she thought was worth sharing. It wasn't something that she was trying to hide from him or something.
Right. Which is like, I think particularly notable considering like what we have seen from her when she's conducted one of her wellness sessions, Amanda, is like, don't enjoy one fact more than the other. Like she seems to be like fairly regimented with some of this stuff. And it does kind of feel like to some degree, like, I don't know if it's like full on, like feeling like breaking protocol when she says to Irving, like Bert's in the conference room, but it's a very unusual note, I think, in that scene.
Yeah, this episode really gives a different perspective on Miss Casey, because I think when we just saw her in the wellness center, there was a way that her affect and presentation and maybe even her position within Lumen was not that distinguishable from Milchek or like even Grainer or Cobell or these other ones. Like she was just somebody else that our protagonists were interacting with that was representing all of the different ways that Lumen is effing with them, right? Yeah. Like there was nothing about her that made us wonder, okay, well, what is her role? Like, is she somebody who might also be severed or be, you know, being utilized for some way? She seemed like part of the apparatus that was messing with the innies. And then in this episode, we see her out of her element and she seems very naive, almost robotic and kind of helpless. And I think it shows this different side of her. She's really nervous about what she's supposed to be doing in terms of observing Helly. She doesn't seem to be intuitive or savvy. She's very easily duped. And then when Melissa, as you brought up, when she does tip off Irving to where Bert is, you really wonder, it's like, does she have an agenda, or is she just trying to respond to these people authentically in the best way she can? And she just is so naive and childlike that this is the best that she can do. So I think that this really opens up a lot in the erasers domain for, what do we think about Miss Casey? And we've already had this idea planted by Petey and by his map that there might be some people that don't leave,
Right.
that there's, that there's other things that are going on. So now I feel like it completely changes the perspective on Miss Casey. The other thing I want to mention about Miss Casey is that that made her seem different from the other innies we know is that she doesn't have that kind of diminutive naming scheme that Mark S. and Irving B.
Right.
and Dylan G. Helly R. She has a title. She has like her, honorific Miss Casey, the way that we have Mrs. Cobell, the way that we have Mr. Grainer, Mr. Milchick. So she seemed like she might be one of those people who has a complete identity and doesn't have one of these like diminutive nicknames. But now in this episode, she definitely seems a thing apart from at least the level of awareness and connection that a Grainer and a Milchick and a Cobell have.
Yeah. We get to see Mark and Helly have some forward progression in their dynamic with one another. Obviously, the episode begins in a really harrowing fashion, exactly where we left off with Helly last time. And it's brutal. There's just like really no other way to describe it other than very, very hard to watch. Mark eventually comes back, and he's sort of blamed for what happened to Helly. And I feel like this feels like we know that Audi Mark is having a little bit of some sort of like crisis of confidence in Lumon, right? Where he thinks that they might be up to something is what he's going to tell his sister. But Innie Mark is going to have some kind of awakening in this episode as well. And it's, I think in some ways, like the possibility of like just the trauma of what happened to Helly, first of all. Then I think like being blamed to some degree of like, well, you're her manager and you kind of let this happen is not the kind of thing that you take gently. I think even if you're a Lumon innie and a Lumon loyalist. So it feels like some cracks are starting to form there. Then, of course, if there's cracks that are starting to form, the only way to break through is with the hammer or the fist wielded by one Ricken Laszlo Hale, as Innie Mark starts to get radicalized by the UUR. I know that we went over a bunch of those quotes last time. This time, I'd like to listen to the man himself.
Oh.
So why don't we play a little clip from this week's episode of Severance?
What is it to fail? My failure to break into the literary world in my 20s was devastating, yet it taught me a vital lesson. That it was not me who was wrong, but literature itself. And that to truly find my place in that world, I would first need to break it entirely. And so I did. A society with festering workers cannot flourish, just as a man with rotting toes cannot skip. What separates man from machine is that machines cannot think for themselves. Also, they are made of metal, whereas man is made of skin. If you
The made of skin is probably the funniest line that's ever been written. It's like such a, like, even if like a very small child quickly understands that like humans are not only made of skin, it's just like such a facile observation that like I can see the skin.
Yeah.
So that's what we're made of. It's all skin, and robots are made of metal. I love it so much. I love it so much. I love Michael Chernus so much.
Should I let it keep going?
Dan Erickson.
I was going to say, you missed the best parts.
No, we didn't. Here we go.
You are a soldier. Do not fight for my freedom. Fight for the freedom of the soldier fighting next to you. This will make the war more inspiring for you both.
It's gonna make the war more inspiring for you
like,
both,
yeah,
Melissa.
because that's the issue. Is they're not inspired enough.
They're not inspired enough in the fight. All right, there's a little bit more.
A good person will follow the rules. A great person will follow himself. Bullies are nothing but bull and lies. At the center of industry is dust.
Unreal. Michael
It's so
Chernus,
good.
friend of the pod, King of
Mhm.
the Ring. The Ricken narration of the UUR is already perfect. You know, if that is all
Mhm.
that we got, in the words of our people,
Diana.
Amanda, Dianu. But we do get more, because the day that Mark goes and reads the book, he comes outside of the elevator, he becomes Outie Mark, he gets to his phone, only to find that he has missed several calls from the man, this very same man who is inspiring right now, Mark's innie. And while his voice sounds exactly the same, the substance is quite different. Why don't we listen to this?
Hi, Mark. It's Ricken. Listen, I know you're still in severed Mark form, but Devin's at 4 centimeters, so this baby is officially coming. We're headed to the birthing retreat now, so please come. Mark, Ricken again. We're at the retreat, and the child is continuing toward the birth canal, so it would be really great if you were here. I don't know if they let you have your phone down there. Oh, actually, if this is Mark's work self, please tell him Ricken said to come quickly. Mark, we're still here, wondering if you're lost.
He's lost. That's definitely what's happened here.
The child is continuing to head towards the
Towards
birthing
the birth
canal.
canal. I also just love when he goes, Mark. It's just like, I think I love this, and at the time we loved this. I love it now. But one of the things I love about it so much in terms of the show's thematics, Melissa, is that, like, who knows, like, who's, like, are there secretly severed people on the show or not? Who can say right now? But if we take Ricken as a character at kind of face value, he's not one of them. And yet there are ways in which even the unsevered have innies and outies.
Yeah, I think that it's so interesting, this idea of and I think Amanda has made this comparison before, like the Fool, right? And the idea of the important literary role and like societal role that the Fool plays in sort of is through its humor, like holding up and like mocking those in power and you know, kind of calling into question that ultimate authority and all of that kind of stuff. So and like Ricken is just like such a classic example of that, where he's an absolute fool. And it's so funny because like so much of what's written in the UUR is absolute garbage, but some of it is kind of on point. And it's so interesting that it's like, you know, he starts to talk about like questioning your relationship with your work and like the combined power of the people and the fact
that's
that
moral development. Like, you know,
Yeah.
a fool follows the rules, a wise man follows himself. I mean, that's actually kind of like Kohlberg's developmental theory of morals, like that you at some point acquire your own moral compass and you can recognize when the rules are unjust and you can follow something else. So I think you're so right on, Josh, to say that like there's a duality to characters, even if they don't have a strict innie and outie form. And there's Ricken, the great author, the philosopher that he imagines himself to be, that he betrays himself as. And then there's Ricken, the bumbling brother-in-law, the like nervous, expectant father who's crying over his pregnant wife as
Babe, I
she goes
just
through
don't want to be
labor.
like my father.
It's good you're getting this all out now.
Yeah. It's so funny, just how different he is, at least in terms of how he's received. Like, I think it's really the reception that's particularly pointed to me. We also like, I know that we're we're going to give out our tier incentives, but I do feel like it's just important to, like, we're in caricature portrait territory right now for certain, that everything with Ricken in this episode is just outrageous. purging secrets can create a soul void that speeds the labor. It's not speeds the labor, is what he says here.
Soul
I
void.
don't. It's so weird. It's so. What does the kelp do? Why the kelp?
We asked the man himself, Melissa,
I
and
know.
he couldn't give it. It's like he says to Mark, do you really
want me to explain
you
it?
really want me to explain this? Yeah. Do you know what I think is actually so brilliant though about this show is that Ricken's character is undoubtedly like it's too much. It's over the top. It's like jumps the shark and it jumps over another shark and then it jumps over a baby goat and then it comes back. But the fact that Devin plays it all so straight and in a totally believable way accepts him for what he is, and she doesn't seem to exactly meet him on his level of eccentricity, but she totally accepts it and she's totally kind to it. And I think it allows the audience to accept his character and not see him as just a clown. So I think that the Devin and Ricken pairing, it works so well for me. I love it. And I think that the actress who plays Devin, and her name is escaping me right now, but she does a really Jen Telek does a really brilliant job at seeming totally like a reasonable, grounded person who is also married to this man and loves and accepts him for all of his eccentricities and faults.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've put it off long enough. And I think it's time for Dr. Amanda to go to the blackboard, erasers in hand. Because, Melissa, I think we should just get out of the way and let Dr. A do her thing right now.
You have the floor.
All right.
The floor is yours. Go for it. Tier and sentence begin with Dr. Amanda at the blackboard.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's clone time. It is clone time. We have clones on the board. So why are there baby goats on the severed floor of Lumon? Isn't that a really good question? Why are there baby goats? We have the baby goats. We have this company that specializes in biotech, doing a lot of different areas. They're obviously doing some neural implant stuff. It's only natural. They're doing some genetic research. They're looking at perhaps some sort of genetic modification, probably cloning. Does anybody remember Dolly the sheep?
Yeah, remind me of Dolly the sheep.
Dolly the sheep.
Dolly the sheep. That's the AI, right? You do art.
No,
Dolly.
Oh, okay.
July 1996 to February 2003, rest in peace, a female Finn Dorset sheep and the first mammal that was cloned from adult somatic cells. She was cloned by associates of the Roslin Institute in Scotland, using a process of nuclear transfer from a cell taken from the mammary gland of an adult goat. So I think that this type of livestock mammal that is, fairly docile, easy to domesticate, it's a very natural target for early cloning experimentation. There's this whole room of baby goats. Are they all genetically identical goats? Perhaps. But it's very interesting that if Lumon is a company that is interested in doing bioengineering to, one, enhance the workforce.
Yep.
And two, create copies of the self for various purposes, like a severed self is one human host that has two consciousnesses. It only logically follows that eventually we would want to replicate that biological self and perhaps implant different consciousnesses in that. You got a couple of consciousnesses in one body. Now you have a couple of bodies. Maybe they share consciousness. Maybe you take that PD chip, you put it in another PD, or you put it in a goat, or you put it in a Miss Casey. I think that this
Shame
is
his name wasn't Billy, because then you could have a Billy
a
goat.
Billy goat scruff. So
I've been working on that joke. Yeah. Sorry.
you nailed it. You nailed it.
Thank you.
I think that there's a lot of thematic things in the show. There's a lot of plot elements in the show that suggest that this is exactly the kind of thing that Lumon could be up to. And now seeing the baby goats, which is so bizarre, it's like an arresting image. It doesn't fit. How could this possibly be woven into all of this? I think it's got to be clones.
We think it's got to be clones. This podcast is huge on clone theory. Melissa, rewatching any of this, because we were so hyped on clones. Does the needle move for you at all in the clone direction, rewatching the grim barbarity of optics and design?
I was going to say the both of you were very hyped on clones. I feel like I was and somewhat remained skeptical about this. I did want to draw everybody's attention to a publication from August of 2022, in vivo goat brain model for neurosurgical training. So I wondered, especially with the sentence of like, no, they're not ready. That if it was some sort of training for the severance procedure and that it was first tested in goats and then was eventually moved on to human and sort of
it's not as fun, Melissa. It's not as fun as clones.
I know, but it was, I was thinking of this as like a classic, like animal model type situation, right? So a lot of like drug development and everything that we have starts in some sort of relevant animal model and then eventually makes its way to human. And so if there was some next type of severance that they were trying to do, maybe one that like wasn't spatially linked at all, something that could be like turned off and on out in the wild, or I don't know, like this is my theory with the goats, is that Lumon is developing some new, more like widespread, far-reaching severance that would have kind of military applications and like a whole bunch of other things, and
they're going to have to develop
on in the goats.
Yeah, they're going to have to develop a new memory test for the goats because I don't think that they know they could name any state or territory.
No, yeah.
I don't think we're getting many of those from the goats.
Yeah, but you could like stick them in a maze, show them where the food is,
sure,
and then do the procedure, and then be like, "Hey, did they find the food?" Like faster, because theoretically they've done this maze before. If not, you know, you could do an animal model of like a short-term memory type situation.
Yeah, I think like for me, the goats are a big eraser on the board. Erasers, of course, being like big things we're putting that up on the board. We're willing to erase them as they come, but those are our theories. And with the goats, for me, they are also a music dance experience because they're such a vibe. The goats are also a caricature portrait because it's so funny. So like we're on this very emotional sort of like bonding walk with Mark and Helly, and they walk in on a guy surrounded by goats saying, "You can't take them. They're not ready." And like at the same point, while that's very funny, it's also a finger trap because there's something like very dangerous. This man seems traumatized. Basically, you could also make a very strong argument that the goats deserve a waffle party point and should be put towards being the refiner of the quarter. The goats could also get a crystal head cube just for anything. Like the goats are all, is the point. Severance is the goats. The goats is severance. We are the goats. We are severance.
The severance. The goats are the goat. You know who else is a big fan of the baby goats is Deachin Lockman, who plays Miss Casey. Was I think her Twitter was like all baby goats for, you know, quite a few weeks. So yeah, the goats are really interesting. I think I remember reading something in the press, like the post season 1 press, about how like this baby goat scene was sort of originally just a WTF thing that got thrown in, that then they were like, oh no, this really works. So I don't know how essential the baby goats themselves are, or whether they're just meant to hint at some of these other things that we've wondered about. Like, is this animal testing? Is this, are they testing cloning technology? Are they doing something else? The baby goats are in the season 2 trailer.
Oh, baby goats. It would be a travesty if the goats weren't featured in the season 2 trailer. So I'm thrilled to hear that. I think the Severance goat totes would be great. Like I think there's lots of goat merch that they are sleeping on, frankly. So maybe season 2
the handbag goats,
we'll
handbook goats.
Yeah.
The goats sort of feed into my eraser theory that I wanted
was
to
gonna
bring up.
ask, yeah.
Yeah, so it's this whole thing around Cobell talking about trying something new with Miss Casey. And sort of this idea that like Miss Casey is a part of whatever. I think it was just sort of part of it being this looking at what happened on the severed floor as sort of an experiment in general for everybody down there. And so that made me think that is part of the reason why Miss Casey is so strange. Is she either, I was trying to figure out the timeline in my head of, is she either a more recently severed person that is some new technique that they are trying, that they have developed on the goats that they are trying in her, or is she kind of an original and she's been there longer than everybody else, and so she was sort of like back before they figured it out very well, or is she a clone? Also an option. But so it was sort of, that was my theory, was that like Miss Cobell is like either the beginning of a new technology or the beginning of the technology that we've already seen in some way.
Well, Melissa, what Miss Cobell says is that the light of discovery shines truer upon a virgin meadow than upon a beaten path. I'm trying something new with Miss Casey, period. So I think this idea that Miss Casey's consciousness is more of a blank slate for whatever reason. Is it that she's newly severed? I mean, we see Helly on her first moments of being severed, and she does not seem like Miss Casey.
Right.
So whereas Helly seems to come into her severed life retaining a lot of her fund of knowledge about how humans interact, about what houses look like, even she has some kind of basic working schemas about the world. Miss Casey does seem a little bit more robotic and naive. And then when Cobell says this thing about a virgin meadow, very interesting, and interesting to wonder how Miss Casey feeds into whatever Miss Cobell's agenda is.
Yeah. The other thing about Miss Cobell that, like, not to necessarily say I've got like a theory on here, but I think it's notable. So notable enough to be putting on the blackboard is this continued idea of like Petey's chip and what was up with Petey's chip that she liberated from Petey's skull at the funeral in the most recent episode before this. And Grainer like says, what does Grainer say? He says it worked, right? Like basically,
full synaptic coupling, which sent me down a rabbit hole of if this was anything. It's not really anything. There's a lot of different like ways that you can describe coupling within like neuro related fields, but there's nothing particularly like meaningful about that phrase. So it's sort of, I think it's just meant to imply the like transmission of the electric signal from one neuron to the next, right? So your synapses are the parts of the brains that like connect the neurons together.
So, but the idea being that like PD reintegrated, I think, is what they're seeing.
And so like the idea is that maybe signals that were being stopped from transmitting from one neuron to the other and have now been reconnected. The brain is kind of reconnected to itself.
And interesting that like whatever is on that chip is proof. Like, so it was not at all clear to me that in this universe of the show's technology that whatever the chip did, you would be able to figure out what had happened once you extracted it. But it seems that that's true. And now Cobell has the chip, but the information on the chip has also been uploaded somewhere where it now exists. And that this is information that would be very interesting to the board that does not believe that severance can be reversed, and that Miss Cobell's waiting to reveal all of that until she
Right.
has a few more things up her sleeve.
This was the
I have a
biggest
new theory.
part of it for me. Like the biggest part of it for me isn't like that it worked. The biggest part of it for me is that Mr. Grainer's like, you haven't told them. And she's like, she's waiting to tell them. So like, we know that Miss Cobell's doing stuff with Miss Casey in this episode. We know that she was really interested in getting that chip from Petey. We know she's super interested in Mark to the point that she lives next door to him. So like, what is she again, like to put this also on like she moved into a shittier office, like what's up with Miss Cobell? Like Miss Cobell is freelancing out a little bit, it seems like. So I just think like the wiles of Miss Cobell, I think could be a name of an episode, and we should certainly be tracking that.
Okay, my new theory. The idea that the chip being implanted is like tracking data, right? It's collecting some sort of data about what is happening. It's somehow able to like hold that information. What if it is transmitting information continuously? And what MDR is doing is like refining their own severance procedure. And the emotion of the numbers are tied to the emotions of that they, because I think like emotionally charged memories would be like processed differently within the brain than non-emotional memories. And so the idea that they're looking for like the numbers that elicit emotion is somehow them like refining their own severance, or the severed employees in general, something like that. I don't know.
No, I think that that's actually a really fascinating idea. I don't know how much we've talked about that on the pod. Could be cool. Any other erasers that we want to put on the board? Because I have one that then moves towards finger trap.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think that, so the other eraser thing that I have on the board, and this is more, I think, just putting a peg in it, is at the birthing retreat.
Took the words right out of my mouth. There it is.
I created a soul void. You created a soul void, Josh, and it helped me birth the idea.
This idea got closer to the birthing canal. Yes.
At the birthing retreat, we know that there's a cabin next to Devin and Ricken's modest cabin that is quite an extravagant cabin, and somebody is in there who has like a weird, like, I don't know if it's her partner, but there's a weird guy all in white who leaves. She's strange, has a weird interaction with Devin. I think that this is a significant meeting between Devin and this very elegant lady in a fancy birthing suite.
Yeah, because if it isn't some sort of relevant meeting, this is a very strange scene to have on the show that otherwise feels like rather arbitrary and just sort of like wasting screen time. So like it should be placed upon the board right now with the limited information that we have as like, what's up with that? Why was that scene here? Is like the question that I would ask myself as a TV viewer. And then I think like I would then like think about it further and be like, scary rich person house, like in the birthing compound. This could be a finger trap of some kind.
I don't know why you need like a whole multi like bedroom house. Like it seems like a lot.
Because need has nothing to do with it. Because it's all about a different word that rhymes with need.
Mm-hmm.
That's my greed.
I just wouldn't
need without the N and a GR.
Any kind of birthing retreat like this. Like I would want a place where you could really easily get medical equipment in and out, and like get somebody to an emergency. Like this whole thing, this whole cabin in the woods with like lots of steps and paths and wooded areas. And
doesn't feel like the vibe, bad vibe.
I mean, it's a vibe. It's a vibe. The birthing retreat is a vibe. I mean, I get like, and I'm not saying like everybody needs to be in like a hospital. Like I know there's lots of different like really great ways to give birth. And like but this whole thing, it just seems particularly like not well set up.
Yeah. Lumon birthing compound housing just sounds bad. Everything about that just sounds bad. Additional finger traps also verging on erasers. What's up with these two portraits that look the same except that the badges are swapped out, Melissa? The grim barbarity of optics and design versus what is it called? For the it's called
The MDR
MDR.
calamity.
Yeah.
the macro data refinement calamity. What are we talking about here, and why is it so important to do this like do-si-do with these people? This whole 266 nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, is it as simple as they keep like clearly it is to help them keep the departments isolated, right? They foster fear in each. It's propaganda, right? There's propaganda going on so that they have distrust of other people and feel more trust within their own unit. And I think that it is probably all cleverly designed as a way to keep people focused on things within the severed floor that they have control over, such as hating on another group of people, and not so focused on the larger system. It's almost like it's all a metaphor for capitalism and all of that.
Almost. Pretty close.
Yeah, and like we've talked a little bit about how like the echoes of kind of the classic psychological experiments, and this is like very much speaks to the minimal group paradigm, which has like demonstrated that if you break people into two groups for something, no matter how arbitrary and stupid, you can really easily get them to bond with their in-group and derogate their out-group and come up with, harmful stereotypes about them and have aggression and fear and all of those great things. So it's very easy to do. And it seems like Milchek is very well versed at how to foment that. And just like Melissa said, like, isn't this a commentary on how, we pit these different groups of people together so that they don't notice the real enemies amongst them and continue to be poor and oppressed and subjugated.
Yeah. The other reason why I think it's a finger trap is because there's blood and knives everywhere.
Yeah.
The painting. Like whoever this
They're
artist
disemboweling people's bowels.
They're disemboweling people's bowels.
Yeah. So Jane Elliott is an educator from Iowa who did this like really classic experiment of blue eyes versus brown eyes, and basically like told the class that like she did this whole thing where the blue-eyed children ended up being the ones that were sort of like considered other, and creating these divides and just showing how easily it can be done for zero reason. And yeah, anyway, one of the examples of the kind of stuff Amanda's talking about.
Yep. I had Bert as a finger trap because he had his hands tied behind his back by Dylan in his belt. Dylan pretty good at tying things.
Yeah.
This episode is really fun because like everybody's kind of getting up to it at this point. It's like they're, even if they are being surveilled by Grainer and Cobell and they know what's going on, like it feels like the beginning of the uprising is happening. Like people are questioning what they've been told. They're sneaking around, and like I think it's very, very fun to have that camaraderie developing and the questioning of authority.
Yeah. MDEs, best vibes of the episode. What do you got, Melissa? What was your music dance experience for this one?
I mean, kind of this fancy birth cabin, right? Like more so not the actual birthing part, because that seems horrific, but like when Mark's sitting out by the water enjoying the lake, like sitting out there, that seems great. I would love to do that.
That's a good vibe. I would hang with that vibe.
The kelp is vibes, like if you want to get a party started, just hang some kelp.
There's some good coffee. What more do you want?
We've had almost 3 full years since Severance debuted. In that time, have any of us hung up kelp?
Wow. I feel like you just blew up my spot, Josh.
I'm blowing up mine too. I didn't do it.
It's because Ricken won't tell us what it's for.
I'm like a little nervous to do it without knowing what
it's very
for.
Powerful. And, once it takes over.
What if it helps create the soul void? I don't know.
And I got to be honest with you. I'm not ready at this stage of my life to engage in a soul void.
No, I'm doing everything I can to like pack it in
Quick,
tight
Mark,
and
tell
the
a
opposite of a
secret.
void.
Like a soul squeeze. I don't know. Like it's
Yeah.
like a very narrow soul corridor, a soul canal. You
If you
know,
will.
The baby is heading down.
no
like
one's
a-
getting out of the soul canal. The soul canal,
Like a soul Go-Gurt tube, right?
Yes.
Just like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Keeping it out. Mandy R, did you have another music dance experience?
No, I also had the birthing camp, the kelp, the whole vibe. I mean, we've talked about how the music dance experience is not necessarily good vibes, it's just vibes. I mean, there are some nice vibes in that beautiful, picturesque woodland scene. It's not the place that I would want to necessarily go to have a baby, but it's vibes abound there. I also think that the vibes in the baby goat enclosure are very vibeful as well.
Yeah. I had the Ricken montage, the UUR as a vibe, like just the way that it's cut together with like all of those hilarious Michael Chernisisms that are also then you're like seeing like the pages on the screen and just like these great wipes from like the page to Mark reading, like the way that this is put together as like a very obviously important moment for Mark S, while also being so utterly ridiculous. They just do such a great job of writing that tonal line. So I also have that as a caricature portrait. It's both great vibes and supremely funny.
Everything from Ricken is a caricature portrait in this episode. The like crying over Devin, the soul void, the kelp, all of the great UUR quotes. It's a really standout episode for Ricken. Like the way that Devin is having a baby and Ricken is having a crisis about somebody stealing his book because it was an advanced copy. Like
He's going to break the embargo.
I know.
Spoilers.
It's bad. I mean, the baby's probably going to be fine, but like this embargo is going to be broken on this much anticipated Rick and Hale book. Yeah, this I think is a really standout Ricken episode. So I give him the caricature portrait award here too. But I do have to recognize that great scene that we perform for the PSR Table Read podcast is a hilarious scene. And I think that, if I go back to the first time I saw that and, the larval offspring that, that solves the mystery of your youthful energy. I mean, that's such a great,
you each have a larval offspring that will jump out and attack if we get too close. The sentiment somehow holds. People are weird.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Solve the mystery of your youthful energy is just my favorite Bert line of the episode.
But like speaking of people are weird, that is the second time the word weird is uttered in the episode. The first time the word weird is uttered in the episode is a line that I don't think like I'd ever like clocked before, but now that this is like my whatever time through the season, I'm like also like seeing things that like I didn't focus on before. So right before Mark takes Helly to go for the walk, he starts to leave with her, and Dylan says, "Careful out there, boss. Weird energy about." I don't know why that destroyed me this time, but I thought that was so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved that. I love that there's just like so much going on, and Dylan's just like, stuff's happening, and we got to be on alert. And yeah, it was very
weird vibes.
Yeah,
it's so funny. Yeah, Dylan also trying to mack it to Miss Casey is pretty funny.
Yeah,
he'll take a hug. Good. No, you don't get one. I could walk you back. I could escort you. No, I'm good. Whatever's going on with Miss Casey, she's not really feeling it with Dylan.
Yeah, Miss Casey being tasked with observing Helly R for signs of sadness. It's also just wild.
Okay, Waffle Party candidates. Who are we advancing towards Refiner of the Quarter? As a reminder right now, I believe it is a 3-way tie at the moment between Irving, Ricken, and Helly. All 3 of those characters have 2 points each towards the Waffle Party, towards being the refiners of the quarter. Will any of them move forward this week? I feel like there's a decent shot for at least one of them.
None of them getting my point. None of them
Oh,
are getting my
neither.
point.
Wow. Well, let me tell you, none of them are getting my point either.
Whoa.
How about that?
Look at us. Look
How
at
about
us.
that? Because I think we already like inundated Ricken with so much love in these other categories, and my MVP point is a little more sentimental. Just to kick us off, I'm gonna give my very first time giving an MVP point, and specifically to the any version of Mark Scout. I think that Mark is very sweet in this episode. I think the really genuine concern that he has for Helly and making sure like starting to become a little more aware of like this is the life we have and like it's not great but it's what we've got, and like I want to like help you as best as I can, like the team building that happens between the two of them, but also just like the kind eyes and like the incredible amount of concern he has. I think it's a very sweet episode for any Mark, and I want to finally give him a little credit here. I don't want too much time to pass without giving Adam Scott a point.
Well, make it a 4-way tie because, boss, I'm giving my point to Mark as well.
Wow.
I thought that this was a great episode for both Innie and Outie Mark, in addition to saving Helly, as you mentioned, having the kind eyes, coming up with that pen cap ruse, which was really well done. He's making the map. He's trying to recreate Petey's map. So he's like trying to solve the mystery. And Outie Mark is on the case too. He's opening up to Devin about Lumon being up to something. So I think that Mark is very heroic in this episode. And we see both versions of him, the Innie and the Outie, sort of soften from his, somewhat defended exterior. And like, not for nothing, like he's a good brother. Like even though Ricken is like a total buffoon and often says really inconsiderate things to him, I think he's a really good sport about it. Like Ricken says a super, super intrusive thing about wanting the baby's middle name to be Gemma. And obviously that hurts Mark a lot. And I think he like responds to it beautifully, like your daughter deserves a name without my baggage attached to it. So I think all versions of Mark are great in this episode, and he definitely deserves an MVP point.
Nice.
Who do you got, Melissa?
I'm going to give mine to Bert. He's so sweet in this episode. He's so funny. I just think like all around, he's just checked so many boxes. I'm so proud of him for being the one that like come and is basically like coming to find Irving to be like, things got weird and I was, wanted to come out and talk to you, but also I needed a joke. And I'm sorry if I scared you again with the hand thing. And I was like, the hand thing, because they're touching hands, because they're adorable. I loved it. And then obviously all of the hilarity around the larva, and I'm very here for it. I wanted to give
platonic relationships beyond the platonic are frowned upon. Is that what we are?
Oh,
and then they're talking about how Kier met his wife at work, so maybe it's not so bad. And
love that. I should say. So Bert's officially on the board. We've got 2 for Mark. And Amanda, I think because you had previously given one just to any Mark. No, Melissa, you did just to any Mark once upon a time, specifically to any Mark. And I think that it's worth like differentiating Innie and Outie Mark. But Amanda, you're giving it to the whole Mark.
The whole Mark. The Mark you Mark.
I think when like if like the one body and both sides, both Innie.
Oh, I give one to Mark's clone actually.
If both Innie and Outie version of the character are great, I think you could give it to like the whole Mark. But with like a note when it's just one of them. So I will revise mine and say it's the whole mark as well. I think you made a convincing argument for why. That
I think
means
mine is also the whole mark. It's my note for it is taking one for Helly and taking care of Petey, which would have been both innie and outie marks.
Okay, so it's the whole mark.
Whole
So
mark.
let me tell you what. All of a sudden, we don't have a tie anymore. We've got the whole mark at the front of the pack. The whole mark has 3 points across 5 weeks of Severance. None of those 2-point getters in the 3-way tie advance. Suddenly, Mark Scout, he could smell maple syrup in the air.
Oh, waffle party, baby.
Getting real tasty here.
Yeah.
In yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The buttery crags. I don't know why I'm doing this like Probst.
Has there ever been a waffle party reward on Survivor?
Not as such.
What if? Let's go back to the.
Is that not the day 39 breakfast is a waffle party?
Let's go back to the universe where we don't know what a waffle party is. What if Jeff Probst came out and was like
sweet
syrup
on your
melted
waffles and
butter?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Wanting something a little healthier? How about a melon bar? Whoa!
That's what Lumon means.
Honeydew, cantaloupe, watermelon? No watermelon. Not this time. Probst would be a great like Milchick style.
Oh my god. Yeah, yeah. That would be
like,
amazing.
He would rock like the short sleeved white shirt, like I feel like he would really be giving some pretty good Milchick vibes.
Yeah. Yeah. And Adam Scott's a big Survivor fan.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of Mark, let's give out one of his crystal head cubes. Not a prize, just a thing we give out. Amanda, do you have a crystal head cube that you'd like to offer up to somebody?
I do indeed. I give my crystal head cube to the Labor coffee because I want to say, like, the coffee looks good, and there's something about the way Jen Tulloch says coffee and talks about the coffee that makes me really want to have a cup of coffee when she's talking about it.
Yeah.
But having been in labor a couple of times, I can't imagine wanting to drink a cup of coffee. Like, there's so many sensations. Like, I don't know if this is TMI, but there's so many sensations happening in your abdomen, and like, coffee has an effect, and I just can't imagine. Yeah, like introduce that to the whole party of things that are happening.
In what my understanding is, you may not even need coffee in that instance.
No
further help required. You're good.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Also, aren't you not supposed to drink caffeine? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, that my first instinct was like, oh, like you. But I mean, at that point, it's not going to affect the the baby's on the way out.
Baby's out. Baby's on the way out. Baby's approaching the end of the birth canal.
And like while you're in labor in like lots of Western medicine, they're pumping you full of all sorts of stuff. It's like we're done with you at this point. But I don't know, the coffee thing. The fact that Devin wanted coffee, I could accept that. It's like you're having a weird esoteric thing in your labor, and who am I to judge? But the fact that this other woman is also making coffee, and apparently in this world, like women in labor are drinking coffee, I missed the memo and it doesn't resonate with me. But that French press coffee and the way that she calls it beautiful coffee, it really gets me in the mood for coffee every time. So I just have to give this crystal head cube to the coffee.
Okay. Shouts to the coffee. Dr. Melissa, what are you going to give a crystal head cube to?
I'm going to give it to the goat guy for taking such good care of the goats. He seems to really care about them, and it's very sweet.
Yeah. They're not ready.
They're not ready.
I like that he's wearing a business suit and an apron. Is that the outfit?
That's the vibe.
That's the ensemble.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's like giving,
he seems really concerned for their welfare.
He's like giving like turn of the century cobbler. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like this is a man he's going to do some work on shoes. Like he's going to like make some buckles.
It looks like he's cobbled a day or two in his life.
Just a couple, at least 2 days worth of cobbling. I suppose it falls upon me to give a crystal head cube to the kelp.
Naturally.
The kelp is mysterious and important, and we may never know its true meaning.
Yeah, I really feel like we've all like come to understand the meaning of this crystal head cube. Like at the beginning, it was like, "What is this?" And now it's like, "No, I get it. I get what a crystal head cube is.
It's just a thing you get.
It's just a thing you get. It's just a thing we give you."
Anything else from the grim barbarity of optics and design from either of you?
No, we're over halfway season 1. It's wild.
Goes quickly.
We're moving through it real quick. Next week, episode 6 of Severance season 1, Hide and Seek is the name of the episode. Hide and Seek is what we are getting into in Severance next time. I believe next time, additionally, we are going to be reaching the point where the Lexington letter was relevant.
Oh,
I think. I believe that's correct. That's when it came out. Let's just see if I can't fact check that here on the pod. The Lexington letter, March 18th, 2022, which is the same date that Hide and Seek comes out. So I'll try to refamiliarize myself with the Lexington letter. If anyone out there has feedback about the Lexington letter,
or solicitations.
We accept solicitations as well. It was Jordan who had written in a couple of weeks ago asking for some recaps on the Lexington letter. Asking ye shall receive, Jordan. We'll go through the Lexington letter. We'll go through Hide and Seek. The Lexington letter, I believe you could still buy it off of Apple, or was it a free download? I can't remember. If it was, now
it was
a
free download, but I don't know if it still is.
Yeah, what does Apple say? Can you just take it? Can you just grab it? I already have it in my Apple books, so I can't tell if this is where it usually has a cost. It just tells me to open it. So I don't know. Seek it out. I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere, and it's got some really interesting information that is, so I would say like canonically adjacent. Like I think like if it's not on the show often, like I don't necessarily like it's like an exit interview. Is it canon? But it's interesting at the very least. It's going to talk about a lot of the things that the show talks about. Worth the deep dive for an extracurricular. So we'll go into that. We'll go into Hide and Seek next time on the Severance podcast. Make sure you are subscribed. We Know Severance.com. That's WeKnowSeverance.com. Hit subscribe. Tell some friends. Let them know that Severance is coming back January 17th, and we shall be here talking about it, marking the occasion here on the pod. You want to send in some feedback? Sure, we'd love that. Severance, RHAP @gmail.com. Solicitations, everything. Questions, solicitations, anything you want to send in. Kelp, we'll take some of that and we'll hang it up around our offices as well. I'm at Round Howard, wherever you can find me, including here on RHAP, We Know Scripted TV. Dr. Amanda, where can people find you and what's going on Crying Laughing?
You can find me on Blue Sky, where I am at Dr. Amanda R. And you can find the Crying Laughing podcast in your podcatcher of choice. We're also on Blue Sky at Cry Laugh Pod, and we are finishing the final season of 6 Feet Under, and sad stuff is happening, and it's great and it's beautiful, and Ariel and I are having a lot of fun talking about it. We're also accepting suggestions for what our next rewatch will be.
Oh boy. Do you have thoughts? Like, do you have like an instinct?
I don't have a.
You want to not speak it out loud because that's a soul void, and we don't want to soul void this out.
I don't want to create a soul void because I don't know what's going to happen. But we are taking suggestions. So you can send us feedback, cryinglaughingpod@gmail.com, or find us on social media.
Okay, Dr. Melissa, where can people find you? What's up on the whirlwind?
Melissa Woodward 28. All the usual stuff going on. We've got some Schmigadoon / musical coverage. We've got Arcane, Todd and Tommy are doing new tuning in stuff coming out soon, which is very exciting. Lots of Veronica Mars and Doctor Who and Previous Little Liars and Smash and all the usual stuff. Come listen to Veronica Mars and join in the recent debates of, is basketball boring and is cake pastry?
Ooh,
So that's the kind of stuff.
I love both of those questions.
Wow.
Yeah,
Going
my answers
deep.
very strongly are yes and no, respectively. So.
Okay. All right. I just need to process it. It's a lot of information at once, and I don't want to give you a half-baked answer.
Is your answer pastry? That's the question.
I don't know. I'll ask the great Emily Fox and see what she has to say about all of that. And perhaps, if reminded, we'll report back with my answer next week on Hide and Seek as Severance continues here, season 1 on RHAP We Know Scripted TV. Till next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.